you believe that we started recording right in the middle of 2020 with all of the COVID and lockdowns going on around us, unable to meet up? So like many a young gentleman, we turned to the internet for our entertainment. Tried to find a place where we could meet up and talk about the good, the bad, and that time that Stu saw a pelican on the canal. In order to facilitate our dreams of answering all of the big questions in film, and after a few attempts at recording via other methods to various levels of success, we found Zencastr, a super easy web-based one-stop shop for recording. Log in and you're ready to record in a matter of seconds. It doesn't take a tech genius to get high quality audio or video. And on top of that, the one time we have had an issue, the fact that the multi-layered backups are stored locally means it's easily fixed all in browser. There are plenty of tools you need when you start podcasting, so let Zencastr take that headache away as it offers a place to record, edit and distribute all from one website. Any lazy bones Jones can pick up and play and have studio quality audio or 4K video put out for the world to see when using Zencastr. Go to zencastr.com/pricing and use our code CAGEFIGHTING and you'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencastr paid plan. We want you to have the same easy experiences we do for all our podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story. And now, hit the music.
Hello everyone and welcome to Cage Fighting. Matt Guy here alongside the boys.
Mad Frit, hello.
All right, our kid.
Andy's wearing a bucket hat, by the way, for everyone. I don't know where mine is. Matt was furious.
I wasn't furious. I don't think any grown man should be wearing a bucket hat unless they're fishing, regardless of if it's for Oasis or otherwise. But that's, it's a passion choice.
They're really comfy, to be fair. Because I very much was with you for pretty much the last 15 years, I'd say. But then I did purchase one last summer, and it is nice to have a bucket hat. It's nice and loose, and it's a bit different to just wearing a cap. But yeah, they are comfy. You should invest in one, Mass.
I mean, this has been the summer of the Crocs, and I'll never go back. So it could be a thing for me, but I don't know. Stu, do you own a bucket hat, did you say?
I used to live in them. But again, that's when I had hair, so I've not had a bucket hat on my head where I've had no hair to cushion it. So I don't know what this paradise is. So, but I was looking on that FOCO website, and they've got FOCO, the Wolves merch, like that thing here, like that there, that Lego, that Brixel Wolf logo, and the Molyneux thing. That was off FOCO as well. But they do all teams in NFL and stuff as well. But they do like weird merch on there. If you go on there, just put FOCO Wolverhampton, and there'll be loads of people like Tara saying "fuck off Wolverhampton." We know this before you even know it.
So that's what that Madwecki from Chelsea said, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. He's promoting a website, but they've got a Wolves fishing hat, as you called it, on there. That's reversible bucket hat, and
They're quite nice. They are.
Yeah. There's two. There's a flowery one, and there's the other one that's reversible, and it doesn't look bad, does it?
That flowery one, I'd actually wear that if it didn't have the Wolves logo on, because I don't really wear much Wolves branded stuff. But I quite like the style of that. Otherwise, that's pretty cool. Because I mean, this is Paisley. The pattern on here is Paisley because it's Liam Gallagher's own label, Pretty Green, where everything's like Paisley themed.
Of course, it is.
Cool.
The thing is about a bucket hat that I don't like the idea of, much like a baseball cap is, especially if you're bald, is that all of the pressure of where the hat lies is immediately like above the eyebrows, and therefore if it's tight on your head, you're not going to have like a halo around the top of your head like you've had a lobotomy or like your skull chopped off.
I mean, in theory, but if you get one that fits you properly, then no.
Well, that's the point, actually.
Yeah, this comes in several different sizes, so I just took the largest one. It's a little bit too big, if anything. There's a bit of wind there, so I walk around with my hand on my head.
I never considered that. Though. I've never seen you with a cap on ever. And that's probably why you're scared of the rim.
And the cap. I don't know. Let's let that one hang. I do have a couple of baseball caps, but because I've got a bit of a Tyrion Lannister head, like I have to have it on like the second or even the first notch of most baseball caps, so it's barely on, like
hanging on with your life there.
Yeah, more just because like I really don't like it being constricted on my head. Like I've got the bloody Great Carly with his hand on my head trying to crush my head. I'm not very cool. I'm just not a hat person, really.
You're making it like you were pulled out with forceps and stuff and your head was stretched.
Oh, I was.
Well,
yeah,
it's not making fucking sense, isn't it?
Yeah. I had to have the forceps and the umbilical cord was wrapped around my neck, so I nearly died. I think that explains a lot about me, doesn't it?
Who is this one?
Yes.
Somehow we're talking about Oasis today. Yeah, it's a MusicCast episode, and we were all kind of geared up to have it's pretty much just a bog standard run-of-the-mill episode. And then Oasis happened overnight, and all of a sudden the world is talking about Oasis, good, bad, and ugly. So we thought we'd have a change of scheduled broadcasting, and we'd go down the route of talking about Oasis. So obviously, huge amount of noise and news going on, but there may be our good friends of the great state of India may not know who Oasis are. It's quite to the level of everybody else. So, Andy, could you give us an intro to Oasis, almost as if you're speaking to an alien? Talk us through Oasis, and then Stu, I'm going to come to you about their cultural impact.
Oasis' first album released in 1994, definitely, maybe. Pretty much, I mean, I was 11 when this album came out, and all of my music up until that point pretty much was just whatever was in the pop charts. Well, that's the kind of stuff you listen to. Guitar music was pretty much dead from probably the late 70s. I know we had a bit of stuff in the 80s, but it was very much geared towards a specific audience in the 80s. Obviously, Greed is Good, Gordon Gekko, all that stuff. We'd come out of that. Britain was pretty much in the doldrums, early 90s. Things weren't looking great. We'd got that second Tory Prime Minister, John Major, was in full swing at this point. Things looked a little bit grim. And then Oasis came along, like a bit of fresh air coming into the pop charts at this point, because they were something new, something leery, something not quite like what, especially people of my generation, really understood. Most of the pop music conversations you'd have before that would have been about East 17 or Take That. You know, it was all about fucking dancing in front of some twat. So Oasis was very different to people of my generation, I think it was. And yeah, it came out, definitely maybe was the first album which hit the shelves on the 29th of August, 1994. So we are literally a couple of days removed at time of recording from that date. So 30 years later, and we're still, talking about Oasis, even though they split up in, I haven't got the date written down.
2009.
I was going to say, I think it was about 15 years ago, wasn't it? It's a good run. After Definitely Maybe, which came in and was one of the fastest selling debut albums at the time, they had What's the Story, Morning Glory, which I think is the album that pushed them from being big to being, like, to even say worldwide would probably be an understatement. They were huge when What's the Story hit the shelves. They just became stratospheric at that point. All around the world, everybody knew who Oasis were. They even sort of managed to do America, which I think, especially at that time, was something of an unknown entity to British bands, apart from the Beatles. We had a lot of, like, Berry and what I think did something in the US, but bands didn't really do anything, and especially guitar-driven rock music didn't really seem to strike a chord over in the United States. But then Oasis went over, and things fell apart a little bit for Oasis in the States. I think Noel threw a bit of a hissy fit and fucked off for a fortnight, and it looked like that was going to be the end of Oasis, and this would have been late 1995. And then they got back together. The drummer was kicked out. They got a new drummer in. Grigsby left, who was the bassist. They got a new bassist in for the American tour. He lasted a week before deciding, I want to be with my bird, and fucked off back home to England. So Oasis were a four-piece for a few weeks because Bonehead then went on to bass, and things weren't looking rosy. And then I keep saying 2000, then in 1996, they played Nebworth. I think it was like the 1st of August 1996, so they weren't even a signed band for 2 years before they went to play like one of the biggest shows of all time. Like Oasis at Nebworth goes down in just legendary status. I think anyone knows about Oasis knows about Nebworth, and vice versa.
2% of the population applied for tickets for it.
Oh, I watched the Asif Kapadia produced documentary and it said 4%, which would have worked out to like 2.4 million people.
Yeah, it's 2.4 million. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, like just a fucking insane number with Oasis fans. They then took a little bit of a break for their tricky third album, which was Be Here Now, which I remember when it came out, there are some good songs on there, and I quite liked that album, but it's very much the one that gets mocked by Oasis fans, whereas Stand on the Shoulders of Giants, their fourth album, is one of the worst albums of all time. Just dreadful. They took a bit of a break and then came back in the early 2000s, where I think they picked up speed, and then they were doing stadium tours on the reg. And then things all went a little bit sideways 2009. Apparently, allegedly, Liam said something about Noel's daughter not really being Noel's daughter. And I think that was very much the straw that broke the camel's back, because they never had a particularly good relationship. But at that point, it was seemingly irreconcilable, and things went until they didn't, which was mid last week. In fact, it may have been the 29th of August when they announced that they were getting back together. So it would have been 30 years to the day of Definitely Maybe, where they said that 2025 will be doing a few shows here, there and everywhere.
Yeah. Well put, thank you. So Stu, like, for those that didn't live it and remember it, what was the cultural impact of Oasis at the time at their pomp? You know, for me, one thing stands out, and that's the Kevin and Perry.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin and Perry Go Large, that's the antithesis of the where Oasis are in the kind of pop culture, because it was music broke comedy, became kind of the public perception of Oasis, and then there was all of the funniness that came with it, Manchester and everything else. But talk about the cultural impact of Oasis.
I mean, Kathy Burke even put on Twitter the other day about that, talking about that clip again, saying that she just mentioned it to Harry and Paul, and they wrote it around that story that she came back from Manchester acting like that as a kid, which I've never heard that before. That was quite amusing. But yeah, I mean, again, like Andy, slightly a year younger, I'll just point that out. But we were very young, so I had to. You hear these stories about people who were 10 years older than us at the time. Britain was a shithole, pretty much like it is now. Things were terrible, and I was trying to explain to when all this kicked off last week. So to Nate and to Emma and a few other Americans, because obviously you just mentioned that they sabotage their own American tour by being idiots and fighting each other. So that they know Wonderwall and maybe Champagne Supernova, and that's it. But you link it to the whole what it meant at the time. And I used to watch Spitting Image when I was 8 years old. I was way too switched on for where I should have been. No one else at school watched this shit. I mean, it was just unbelievable, really. But so you kind of the John Major and the Grey Puppet and everything was all dull. And I obviously didn't get a lot of what was going on, but you can kind of see around the edges of what was happening. And then this band comes along who were, again, a bit in your face. The things that obviously we'd seen with punk and stuff before then, but these were for us. These were normal people. And I think you look at the cultural stuff, I just said with comedy as well, with the Fast Show and Harry Enfield and all that kind of thing. It was so intrinsically linked with football as well, that you think of football in the early 90s where it was coming off the back of Hillsborough and all the violence of the 80s and stuff like that. And then you have these two blokes from Manchester supporting the shittest team in Manchester at the time, which is still bizarre to think of now for the youngsters. But coming along, talking openly about how much they love football, playing music that spoke to people who were similar to them at the time, like just on the dole, nothing else going for them. They're just normal blokes enjoying the football, having a drink, having a fag, whatever they want to do. Yeah, a few other substances as well, but they were normal at that point, and they spoke to people when people didn't have a voice. And it seemed like that was what happened in 93, 94, 95, that they were, at the time, from Be Here Now onwards, that wasn't the case. But early on, the whole Britpop thing that started with them, probably didn't start with them, but they were them and Blur, and Paul Plett mentioned them, okay, fine. But then you put like Supergrass and all of the others into one big bubble, and that whole movement it didn't last very long. I know you're going to mention Britpop later anyway, but it meant something for the people at the time, and I think that's what's caught on this time, because when I heard it, the whole thing exploded, and it meant something to millions of people who didn't have a voice, and I think that's what Oasis are more than anything else.
Okay, interesting. Well, we skip forward to the present day, and Oasis announced that they are going to do a series of huge shows, no festivals, just these dedicated shows. And then the clamour for tickets was crazy. There was a pre-sale ballot, which had a huge demand, crashed their own systems to do that. What were your immediate thoughts when you heard the news, Andy, from that Oasis were getting back together to doing this? Was this like, a CM Punk Cold Day in Hell? It was never going to happen, and now it is? Or do you think it was always going to happen, and only coinciding with the fact that Noel Gallagher's got a £20 million divorce that he needs to pay for?
I think it was always going to happen. I genuinely do, because it was the best time of both of their careers. And nothing ever really dies, does it? Let's be honest, especially when it comes to the music scene. Everyone comes back for at least one more show as a band. So I wasn't surprised. You are right, it does tie in quite nicely with knowledge and a few extra quid at the minute. But I wasn't shocked at all. This was fully expected. It was more a case of when was it going to happen rather than will it happen, I think. And it sort of makes sense because it is the 30th anniversary of Definitely Maybe. So, yeah, why not tie it in with something like that? People, they'll be pumping out the album again, I think was released on Friday, 31st of August. I think they reissued the 30th anniversary of the album. I've got the 20th and the 25th anniversary of the album already, so I've not bothered buying this because I don't think there's anything new to it. So there is going to be a bit of a clamour for the people who were there then anyway. Like, their interest will be piqued just because it ties in with that date. And I've seen people talking about how Wonderwall seems to be trending on TikTok, and that seems to be, let's be honest, that is the biggest social media platform in the world right now. So they're kind of striking whilst the iron's hot, I feel. And don't get me wrong, I think people would always be interested in going to see Oasis. But yeah, maybe it is the right time for everybody that they get back together now.
I think the Wonderwall thing is a bit of a meta kind of in joke where everyone's making the same joke and saying, I've got tickets to Oasis. I really like Wonderwall. Is there any other songs I should listen to?
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And then it's obviously gone haywire. So before we go into kind of questions about Oasis and the format that we normally do for this, the price point of entry, Stu, for you, 150 quid, generally speaking, for tickets for their gigs across the UK and Ireland. Compared to Taylor Swift, it's a bit more than Taylor Swift. Before we go on to dynamic pricing and all that, and Taylor Swift's the biggest artist in the world right now. Worldwide sellouts of everything, everyone going absolutely wild. Do you think that £150 price was justified, considering the scale and what it was or what it is and what it means to the nation? Do you think that starting price point was where it should have been?
I mean, there's what it should have been and what it could have been. I mean, it could have been 1,500 quid and it would have sold out day one anyway. I thought, and I scrambled around, and not expecting it to happen like it did after just spending so much money on other nonsense that I don't really need, like going to that Jets game. So I'd kind of, in my head, I'd got 200 quid in my head, expecting that, knowing the Taylor Swift price and all this, the price of fucking everything now, and football tickets, how much they are, and everything else. And I thought, well, okay, because of what it means to this country, especially, and we'll get onto worldwide stuff later, but what it means to this country, I fully expected around 200 quid, 250 maybe. So when he came out at 155 for standing, I thought, oh wow, that's a bargain, which is obviously stupid because it's not a bargain. It could easily be like 80, 90 quid. It could be like Paul from the Beautiful South, can't remember his surname, remind me.
Heaton.
Paul Heaton, yeah. When he said about it, he goes, charge 30 quid and make a profit couple of years ago. So obviously it's silly money, but gigs are silly money now because they don't make any money anywhere else, do they? So for me, it wasn't that bad because I'd hyped it up in my own mind. But to normal people and to the original audience, which you think, okay, that audience from that time have grown up now, so you'd think and hope they'd have better jobs than they did at the time, that they'd be able to afford this. But of course, it's a piss take because the whole thing is. For me, I was okay with it.
Then came along the Ticketmaster shambles, and I think the shambles was kind of twofold. So there was the ridiculous demand, to get in, to even queue for the website, which was insane. Then you get into the website, kicks you out when you get to number one. So people who'd been waiting hours were booted out once they'd got to the front of the queue. There's shambles number two. And then when people finally got in, they'd be greeted with a message about dynamic pricing. And the dynamic pricing makes it out like we were in a stocks and shares scenario where the tickets were coming back at £358 I got. I thought, oh, am I going to meet them for this money or something? Like, is that what I'm paying for here? Am I doing a 4DX, getting posh seats and blah, blah, blah? No, that's just the price. And then it came out, Ticketmaster were very, very quick to point out that these prices are set by the promoters and the artists, which leads me to my first question, I guess, is these working class heroes that speak for the people, Stu, as you mentioned, and rightly so as well, charging and having a hand in charging this kind of money that no working class person within their right mind should be paying in a time like this, realistically speaking. If you can afford to pay £358 for a ticket, you're probably not working class. And I say afford, not that you have paid, but can responsibly afford it. Does that not disappoint you? Does that not hurt as a fan of this band? I don't know. Am I thinking into it too much? What does it feel like for you?
I mean, as soon as I heard this was happening, for context, I was on the couch. So I was on the couch going to Nottingham for that Forest game, and every single person on that couch had their phones out. Everyone was in the queue for a good 40 minutes, and oh no, I thought it had frozen because you were both so still.
I need to hear what you say. I'm on the edge of my seat.
So everyone on the couch everyone had the phones out, and that was a good 40 minutes. So that was 20 past 8. Everyone was in the queue and that thing was going around. And you look at it and you think, okay, fine. The demand's there. There was 15 million people signed up for that pre-sale thing as well, which is mental numbers in itself. And you think, okay, fine. We know what the prices are. It's all right. As soon as that dynamic pricing thing happened and that started coming out, I just logged off. I just closed the window down. I thought, I'll just carry on drinking now. That's fine. That's me done. That's me done. That's me out. And could I have afforded it? At a push, probably. Responsibly thinking about things, it would have been a bit of a piss take when I could have spent it on other responsible things. Not that I'm responsible anyway, as we all know this, but And I was thinking about buying myself a Series X just to play Indiana Jones when I could just pay 70 quid and get our PS5. But still, the fact that Oasis did that themselves doesn't surprise me. The whole working class hero thing post What's the Story More in Glory doesn't exist. As soon as they become millionaires, you can't then write songs about being poor, can you? So from then onwards, that's what I was saying. I love them, and the sheer amount of people that got contacted them when it was announced. I mean, because we heard with that documentary that Noel did, the YouTube thing that was 30 minutes long, where he was speaking nice about him, and then the thing that little Dan had told us about that he'd heard that it was happening. So it was kind of, it built up over time that I knew it was going to happen. We all knew it was going to happen then. But when it was actually announced, there was people I hadn't heard of for a good decade sending me messages on Facebook, texting me, so, are you going to go? How you feel? I went, well, yeah, because I love them. And I always have done since I was 10, 11 years old. I had half of my bedroom was Oasis posters. The other half was walls. Small bit of porn, but that was hidden. But yeah, but I don't think of them as, they're not working class. They haven't been working class for 25 years. As soon as they start writing out things that weren't going to the chippy and all, a bit like the Arctic Monkeys, all that stuff afterwards. When it was genuine, it was genuine. Afterwards, it's not the same. Mm-hmm. So it didn't surprise me. It didn't disappoint me because it's a kind of a thing you expect from millionaires and what they do because they don't care. So I know why people are pissed off, because they still see them as these icons of what they are and what they were, but they're not. They're millionaires.
Mm-hmm. So, Andy, what say you with this? I mean, you're very passionate about the fact that there has to be legal control over this, and the dynamic pricing and Ticketmaster need to be held to account for their part to play in it as well. So where are you on this? Is there any bitterness towards the band because of this for you?
Yeah, I mean, there is to some degree, because let's be honest, at 150 quid per ticket. I mean, I know they had some concessions at 75, but let's be honest, 150 quid is what most people are going to be going for. They wouldn't have been having to queue for their dole money, would they? If they'd have just sold every ticket 150 quid. They'd still be raking in like fucking £10 million just for this fairly short tour. So, yeah, like, there is a bit of resentment that the band have done that. Am I surprised? No, not really, because, as I said to Stu in the group chat yesterday, this is late-stage capitalism, isn't it? Let's be honest. Mm-hmm. It's all about just rinsing everybody for every last penny. So I'm not shocked at all. And people still paid it. So does that prove that they were right to do it? Mm. Potentially. It's disgusting. It's profiteering. To all intents and purposes, being a ticket tout in the United Kingdom is illegal. You shouldn't be reselling tickets for a markup and, without any sort of guarantees there. And this is what Ticketmaster are doing in full sight of the law, supported by the laws of the land. It is disgusting, but it is an open... It's not even a secret, is it? It's just the way it is with these people. And I just think it's absolutely abhorrent that they can do this. And I think any band who signs up for it happily, knowing that they're fans... I mean, 150 quid to the average person is a lot of fucking money, isn't it? Let's be honest. 400 quid to the average person, like that can stop you from eating for a week. Like, let's be perfectly honest. The average UK wage is something like £600 take home per week. If you're knocking 400 quid out of that for one day, and that's not including all of the travel and everything on top of it, they're asking a lot of people to pay that much money in one go. It's disgraceful.
I mean, I worked this out the other day. It's 495 quid if you go 40 hour a week on minimum wage before tax. 490 quid a week. So
So that's gone, because you're paying 360 quid for the ticket. You've got all of the fucking wanky Ticketmaster fees that I saw some that the fees were coming out at like 150 quid just in fees for 4 tickets. Like, for what? Like, surely that should be baked into the price of it. Well, so there you go. That 400 and whatever you said it was, Stu, that's gone before you've even thought about the coach, the train, the petrol, whatever you need to get there.
and eating and paying your bills for a week as well. Forget that. But yeah, I mean, talking about Ticketmaster, I mean, them Jets tickets for the Spurs stadium, it was 115 quid. They weren't the cheapest ones. The cheapest ones were 60. But I didn't want them because they were in the gods. I wanted a decent seat because it's a once in a lifetime, realistically, thing to do. 115 quid. I knew it was silly, but whatever. That was 10 quid fees on top of that. And then a £5 delivery fee to send an email to your phone to get the ticket. But Viagogo was selling them same tickets the same day for £322. The same day. And they were all gone by the end of it. So, and we've said this before, we said this on the Fancast about the wall sticky prices. Well, they do it because they know they can. And there's no regulation to it.
Yeah, I don't want this to be like a Dead Money episode or anything like that, but yeah, it's unlawful essentially, and I don't know when that changes because the money makes the world go round, doesn't it? At the end of the day,
it doesn't change. I think the issue is it doesn't change because your Ticketmasters and the likes, they lobby MPs. How many times have you seen pictures of? I mean, we saw Keir Starmer at the Taylor Swift concert. I would put a fucking £1 million that I don't have that he didn't pay for that. That was a freebie from Ticketmaster, so that when he gets in, Ticketmaster can do whatever the fuck they like. That's how they, Ticketmaster have got more power because they're not regulated, realistically.
Fair. Right, let's get on to, before I slam Britpop later on. I'm not really going to. Question 1 then. I want a 5-track playlist if you're trying to sum up Oasis for the newbie. Andy, I'll start with you. So 5 tracks, if you were trying to sum up Oasis to newbies, what would your 5 side tracks be?
I found this quite easy, actually. Like, there was just 5 songs that immediately sprang to mind for me. And like, I kind of normally expect these things where I'll come out with maybe 25, 30 tracks and I'll have to whittle it down. But this was immediate. Rock and Roll Star is the first. This is track 1, side 1 of Definitely Maybe. She's their introduction to the world. And it is them literally saying, I want to be a rock and roll star. Everybody look at me. I'm the fucking best. I'm going to be a rock and roll star. And really, I don't think you can. I think that probably sums Oasis up better than any song ever, to be perfectly honest. So that would be the first track that I would put out there. The second one, I'm staying on Definitely Maybe. It's the only Oasis tattoo I have. It's the first tattoo I had where it's Live Forever. The word Live Forever tattooed on my arm. It is a song about friendship and brotherhood, and that pretty much is very Oasis back in when they first started out. That it was all about we're all together, and that's the sort of sentiment behind it. So yeah, Live Forever would be the next one. I would then move on to What's the Story. I'm going for Don't Look Back in Anger because I don't have a Noel song on this list. Could just as easily be Wonderwall, but Don't Look Back in Anger, purely for my memory of being in Wembley Stadium. Noel Gallagher was the only one on stage with his acoustic guitar. He didn't sing a fucking word. The crowd sang the whole song, and he's one of my favourite memories of being at a gig. And I think that Don't Look Back in Anger is a more anthemic song than Wonderwall. So I think if you're new to Oasis, I think you'd probably get in on Don't Look Back rather than Wonderwall. So that would be third choice. Fourth choice, it's the second song that Liam wrote because the first song Liam wrote, Little James, is horrific. I'll go with Songbird. Lovely. Just a nice little ditty. Liam's vocals over an acoustic guitar. It's much more laid back. It's much more chilled for Oasis. They do have this in their locker, even though they didn't always bring it out. So Songbird would be next. And then I'd ended up with probably my favourite song of their post-2000s return. It's off Don't Believe the Truth, and it is Lila. It's Oasis at their most swaggering big bollocks. And I absolutely love Lila. Such a wonderful song that I remember seeing them at the City of Manchester, the Etihad, as it is now. And I just remember when that song came on, the whole place just erupted. It was incredible that everyone just had a big smile on their face, and that's Oasis for me. they make me smile, they make me happy. So those would be my 5 songs.
Okay, interesting. Stu, what's your 5?
I mean, they're very different to Andy's, thankfully. I had 20 on here to start with. And I'm just going to ask straight away, Half the World Away, Roll With It, Wonderwall, Don't Look Back at England, Champagne Supernova, because everyone knows that anyway, regardless of where you are in the world. So I'm just taking it for the argument's sake that I can get the others in more than anything else. I went for Cigarettes and Alcohol over Rock and Roll Star, but they're very interchangeable. It's the same thing. It's about them having fuck all, but still having something to enjoy at the end of the week and whatever. Like I was saying earlier, when they were normal people. And talking about whatever, it is whatever. I mean, that was the first time after watching that video. I never thought of eating McDonald's French fries like that before, straight out of the carton. Everyone tried it.
Yeah. But
I love that song. And I've got the Japanese single version of it, and I've got it as on its own. And I think it was in Japan when it was on Definitely Maybe. It's either Japan or Indonesia. It was a foreign album anyway that we used to use. What was it called? Was it Mike Lloyd's in town? The record shop. Where
I remember that. I only remember Highway 66.
It was by where Next? No, not Next. Yeah, where Next is now at the top of there, where that ramp. It was there. I'm sure it was Mike Lloyd's. Anyway, he used to be able to import stuff as well, and he used to have some weird stuff in there. So, like you, I've got boxes of the stuff in the loft. I ain't got around to getting it all down yet, but I had every single released that had different versions and different B-sides and everything, and I'd make my own compilation. Back to the topic. So you got Cigarettes, Alcohol, whatever. Don't Go Away, because it's very un-Oasis-like. They didn't really do kind of ballady stuff, really. And I know it was used in Dream Team, so it was kind of ruined when Louise left. But I thought for years, yeah, that's my funeral song, that is. It's a nice thing to think about. And then I'm going to have... I know some might say, because some might say it was the first one of that album that I've heard of What's the Story, Morning Glory. I don't know how or why, but it just was. And being in a house of me being the eldest, my mum really not being into this stuff, my dad not caring anyway, it must have been on the Mac Live or something like that where they played it, and I thought, yeah, this is class. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I'll go for Little by Little for one of the later ones, just because, again, like you, when I heard that performed live, it was one of them spine-tingling moments where, because it was relatively newish at the time, and it was one of them where I heard it for the first time and then I played it over and over again. And I completely got that song. And hearing it and hearing everyone there being the same as me, I thought, yeah, that is superb. So yeah, the other versions of the top 5 Oasis songs.
Yeah, mine was kind of a bit of a mash of both of them for different reasons, really, because, well, the first thing I thought of was putting their cover of Come On Feel the Noise as number 1 for the first thing you should listen to, because without Slade, without T-Rex, there is no Oasis. And I think for them to cover Slade, and it'd be such a good cover as well, that should be where you start with their influence. But in 5 tracks, you can only get so much in. The Master Plan, the song needs to go in for me. Unbelievable track. And with that in mind, you know, apart from Half the World Away, but I think Little by Little as well, for me, like not the most popular of Oasis songs in the pantheon of their kind of all of their work. But I didn't live and breathe Oasis in the same way that you two did, because I wasn't there. You know, it was a few, I would have been 5 or 6 at the time, so I wasn't old enough to, you know, so yeah. Though the emotional songs for what those meant don't quite mean the same, so I enjoy what I think of the more wanky musical, like the better songs musically, and I think Little by Little, Master Plan, Lila is, as well. He's great, big booming swagger, as you say, as well. Cigarettes and Alcohol is great when you're pissed at a nightclub. Everyone loves it, and it's not. It doesn't have the Mr. Brightside-ness that it probably should, but it doesn't. Mr. Brightside is like a great song when you're pissed, but you could hear it in Pop World and you could hear it in Walkabout. You wouldn't hear Cigarettes and Alcohol in those places, I don't think. Even though it has the same kind of effect on people, I don't know. Yeah, there's a number of songs of Oasis that I think get overlooked in place of the laddie, beer swilling, Adidas wearing side of them that miss out. That's why I think like Master Plan as a compilation album is number 3 for me in terms of if you rank Oasis albums. Because let's call myself an outsider to them. Oasis have 2 good albums, and then the Master Plan, and then everything else are good, but not great. And if for them to have I don't think. I mean, you tell me. Does the Master Plan get the love that it should? I don't think it does.
It did at the time.
Yeah, I mean, I remember they even did a video for Master Plan and Acquiesce. They did videos for B-sides, which is one thing I fucking adored about Oasis, that nobody took B-sides seriously as musicians. They was just, we need to fill it out so we're not really ripping people off. So we'll put something on the other side. And Oasis always took the B-side serious, like it was another chance to show the world what we can do. And the Master Plan album, to be fair, I was listening to it like half an hour ago. I bought the vinyl because it was the 25th anniversary a couple of years ago. So I've got the big double fold vinyl, and I was listening to it earlier, and it holds up. Like Fade Away, I think might be my favourite of the B-sides, but Master Plan is outstanding. The whole album, front to back, is full of absolute belters. I think people do appreciate it because, as you say, it does have that. Talk Tonight's another big B-side that a lot of people love. Properly love, yeah. So yeah, I think it does get the love that it deserves, at least from the fans of Oasis. It probably to the wider world, it probably doesn't get known because it's an album of B-sides, and it's very rare for an album of B-sides to be worth the money that you pay for them. But that one is that would be as good as a best of for Oasis because their B-sides were next level for like on pretty much every single one of their singles. There was at least one B-side you think that could have been the A-side, to be fair.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. So question 2 then of the questions, I talked about who influenced Oasis, but who were the Oasis influence, would you say, Stu? What was the kind of legacy that they left on music when they split up, as we thought at the time, kind of indefinitely?
I mean, my first thought was Kasabian straight away. Being a Leicester equivalent of, I mean, that was the one thing that pissed me off, that I went to on that last tour, that I went to Coventry, which is a bad thing to do at all.
Say no more.
Obviously. And they had the Enemy supporting them, whereas if you went to Leicester, they had Kasabian, which was annoying. And you can throw the Enemy in there as well. But Blossoms, obviously, and it's kind of the closest thing to them whenever they've been at Glastonbury. There's one that I'll tick off. But more recently, I think Sam Fender is obviously very Oasis influenced. Some of his stuff with sings about the subject matter and all about Newcastle. You can very superimpose Newcastle with him growing up, them talking about Manchester and them growing up. Very interchangeable. You know, the melody side of things, you got the rock stuff, and I think if you wanted a dream, I mean, we could do this later on, wherever. If you wanted a dream Oasis support band lineup, I think Sam Fender would be a great choice.
Andy, the Enemy, where do they land for you on Indie Landfill?
I mean, they're towards the bottom. Like, there's a lot of shit that would probably be above them in my listening chart. They're bland as fuck. I just didn't get it with them at all. Them and them cunts who did Same Jeans,
The View
and Hard Fight, and They all came out at
Didn't they?
pretty much the same time, doing the same wank, and it was just, yeah. I've got,
Throw the twang in there as well.
The twang.
I remember the name, but I can't remember what the song was.
Oh, they had one,
They were-
one song.
Were they Brummies? The twang.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They'll play the version of like the O2 Academy 2 around the country, but then they'll play like the O2 Academy in Birmingham. That's it. So their entire their whole shtick.
Who sang the Big Sur?
That was, I was gonna say the Lars. That's not the Lars. That's
The Thrills. Is that the Thrills?
the Thrills. The Thrills.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Put them on there as well.
There was a load of them, wasn't there? At that time,
Yeah.
it was horrendous.
Interestingly, though, it was like regional indie bands. By regional, I mean like the accent, but
Yeah.
just became the thing. Post Arctic Monkeys, boom, and not one of them really were any good. Bar, I mean, I liked the first two Peter Detective albums. I thought they were pretty good. Then they just disappeared off the face of the earth. But apart from that, apart from the Arctic Monkeys, there was I can't think of a single band with an accent that I enjoyed on a big scale.
Not that I'd still listen to. Weirdly, I was reading an article after we did that Larrikin Love album. I was reading an article about indie landfill stuff, and I think it was The Guardian were quoted as saying that the first band of indie landfill was Razorlight. They were the band that was the dividing line. Everything out Razorlight and onwards was just landfill because it just all sounded sort of the same, pretending to be somebody else. And I really liked Razorlight. I wouldn't put Razorlight in there, but I would
I
put.
mean, they headlined Reading Festival. Like,
Yeah.
they were a commercial success if they weren't the greatest on the ear. But they had, they weren't like mass one album bands like Larrikin Love, like other ones. Yeah, that's a little harsh. But
I mean, there's one that I watch it because I don't know why I watch him, but Justin Hawkins Rides Again. What a strange YouTube channel that is. And he did a video the other day about when they got back together, and he a little anecdote about how he was how Liam stopped him. He drove past him when he was walking around Lowestoft and said how he loved the darkness and all this stuff. And he was saying, I'm going to do what I can to get tickets. I love Oasis. Oasis are one of our biggest things, and we kind of got drawn together. I thought, you don't associate the darkness and Oasis in the same room, let alone anything else.
I could see it. I could definitely see an influence.
Are the darkness the pulp of the indie landfill era? So what I mean by that was they don't fit in the genre, but they had a place within the musical sphere at the time, but they don't fit anywhere, and they're a bit different, very camp, etc. I think there are comparisons to be made there.
Probably. I mean, I love the darkness.
I think that's a very astute observation. Because Pulp, obviously, their first album was 1983, so they weren't really Britpop. They were something else, and then Britpop formed around them. And I think the darkness is sort of the same, that they existed because they played guitar. They existed in that world purely because they fit nowhere else.
Yeah, it's like Slipknot getting banded into nu metal, which they fucking hate. They just have to find a home somewhere. I'm going to stop the order of questions around now, because it seems like a good segue to put it. I'll go to Stu first to get the anger out of the way, and then I'll come to Andy for the actual the meat here. Was Britpop overrated? Now, I say that in the musical sense of the word because no band associated with Britpop wants to be associated with Britpop, for one. So that, for me, says a lot. And Britpop, for me, isn't necessarily even the music. It was the fanfare of the artists. It was the blur of the Oasis in the album charts. It was the cover of your magazines and stuff like that. Like, it wasn't the music that was created. It was the sphere and the attitude of the time. It was really short in comparison to like other musical movements as well. And when you think, actually, hardly any of the bands that are associated with Britpop had like long, stellar careers either that spanned like new music. Now, I don't know. Britpop is more of a time period than a genre anyway, and for that reason, is it overrated? Stu, what say you?
I kind of agree that it's not. It's more of a vibe than you can't say like the example you used, Motown. It's not that. Or you can kind of, I mean, Britpop. You had things like Suede was counted as Britpop, which it wasn't at all, really. And you had things like the Lars and James and stuff like this, where they have one or two good songs and then they fade off to. Obviously, music people love them and whatever. People who are into it or going to watch everything live and Shine Festival and everything like that, great. But if you're talking from a mainstream point of view, like what I mostly am, I suppose, that it's probably spanned 5 years, between 94 and 99, because after 2000 it wasn't there, because the Millennium Bug wiped everything. And you had certain, I mean, we haven't even talked about the Verve, who were superb, and Richard Ashcroft on his own for a while was good as well. Ocean Colour Scene, there were more mods than anything else, but they were thrown in as well. All these, there were very, very excellent bands, and Stereophonics maybe as well, which I kind of, my little jape at Stereophonics, because I was listening to Jeep the other day as well. They're all my favourite bands from that time, because that was the time we grew up. Some would say we never have. But it's not, you are right, it's not a movement, it's not a musical golden era. It's more of a vibe that just had some excellent bands of a certain type that came through at the same time.
See, I would argue that the best music to come out of this country, when Andy says guitar music died in the late 70s or whatever, and then along came, I would say nearly all of the best music that's come out of this country came after Britpop anyway. So the fact that, like, you've got Radiohead, Muse don't get anywhere near the flowers that they deserve. They really don't. They're fantastic musically. He's a great singer, Matt Bellamy. They, much like Chris Jericho, for the rest of the people out there, they reinvent themselves when they need to. They're still pumping out music now that's credible. But I just don't see Britpop as this golden era of music that everybody else seems to think that it is. There's like, it really didn't have the same. And the fact that most of it now you'd listen to and you'd hear it on like Smooth or Magic says everything about it. The fact that you'd get like Stereophonics and stuff on there now, and everything else, stuff that would appear on Jules Holland's Hootenanny. That says everything. That says everything about Britpop, surely. And the fact that nobody wants to be associated with it.
I think that's
an embarrassment to the artist.
It's probably why, because it's so intrinsically linked to being there at the time that there's no going back. And if you weren't there at the time, it's almost like Andy's hatred from nostalgia. That if you weren't there at the time, you will never get it. You weren't there, and it wasn't all encompassing, and that's all that was on everywhere. And when you went to Molineux and they played everything, and then they played Simply the Best, where the teams come out, we inevitably lost to Bolton. But that's all that was ever played. There was no Dizzy Rascal. There was nothing like that. There was nothing else. It was just Britpop for 5 years, and then it changed. So if you weren't there at the time, you go back and listen to it, and you probably think, it's like just going back and, like, if you get a kid today, do you want to listen to some Groove Armada? They're not gonna voluntarily do that, are they? But at the time, they were great. But you had things like Faithless were thrown in there, the Prodigy were thrown in there with Britpop as well, which was ridiculous. They were just around at the same time. So I think that's probably why people don't want to be associated with it, because it didn't mean anything. It just meant popular music from 94 to 99 that got bastardized into what it originally was, which was about being a bit edgy, a different type of person rather than your classically trained musician coming through. And then it just got turned into something else. That's probably why.
I mean, Andy is someone who, and I know we're not talking like British now, but someone who's into your garage rock, so like Hives, Strokes, the Vines, Libertines, stuff like that. That it doesn't fall into indie land for me. The Hives were the darkness of the pulp. because I never felt it's indie.
Yeah.
Always associated with it for some reason. Where do you lie on Britpop being overrated? Or not?
I mean, it sort of is. It's like, I think Britpop, everyone talks about Britpop and they're thinking about Noel Gallagher at 10 Downing Street. They're thinking about Euro 96. They're thinking about, Noel's big fuck off guitar with the Union Jack on. They remember those things about it. And you've both said it already that it's about vibes rather than it is actual music. Because I don't think I've popped into the old Google machine, Britpop bands. You got Blur, Oasis, Pulp. Now, Blur quickly moved away into doing garage rock. They were influenced by Pavement and stuff before the 90s were over. So they moved off. Pulp sort of went back to who they were, writing these sort of almost sleazy, sexy, dirgy songs. They moved away from it quite quickly. Suede Stews dealt with Elastica, sort of stuck around, Sleeper. Mm-hmm. They never really troubled the charts. They were there in the background and, they were part of a night out, but they were never the headline set. And I think that's sort of what Britpop was. It was just that it was a group of British popular bands. There was no theme really. It's just that it was mostly guitar based. There was a bit of an attitude. There was the lad culture that was going on. And I think that's what Britpop was. And it is pure nostalgia, like pure nostalgia. This isn't a case of, it was better then. It was a case of I was better then because I was younger. And then that's all it is with it. And I genuinely think that because, as you put it, musically, none of those bands are great. Well, I love a lot of those bands that I've mentioned, but Pulp or Jarvis has done better stuff since and before the period of time they were associated with Britpop. Oasis, the documentary, the Supersonic documentary I watched earlier, Noel even says that none of us were the best at what we did. Like, we were just sort of all right, but together we were the zeitgeist. And I think that's all it is. The world changed because we'd come out of Reaganomics and all that shit in the 80s, and we were moving to the new world. The New Labour, as it was in this country, was the future of England. And this sort of spearheaded that movement, I think.
And Lowe did an FHM and football in the Premier League. Everything was all at the same time.
Yeah, and all of that I would lump in with Britpop.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. The Premiership is a Britpop product.
TFI.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, every week there was a new band on there that I'd never heard of. And all of a sudden that was my new favourite band because it was just incredible. And when you think about, like, you had Reef was obviously a big part of TFI Friday, Eat Your Letters. I mean, that still rings in my head. And I bet even now when they play that song live, I wonder if they like it or loathe it because people are definitely singing Eat Your Letters in the crowd. Ocean Colour Scene was the walkout music.
Yeah.
It was
I really feel for Reef because I must have seen Reef at least double digits amount of times. And they, like, if Oasis and Blur, like, I think they were picked to, like, third place that week or something like that. If they never existed, Reef would have been a significantly bigger band. If Britpop hadn't existed, Reef would have been a much bigger band than they were. I think they could, because they didn't fit into. They were like these long-haired surfery types from Bristol. It just didn't fit the narrative that of Britpop, really. Yeah, it's a shame, really. But they're still, sell out gigs up and down the country and stuff, just not to the level that they probably wanted.
Big Wolves fan as well, Gary Stringer.
Yep, he is, yeah. Yeah, big Wolves fan.
And they're recognisable if you see them now as well. Like, they don't, like, the 90s that you think of. Yeah.
No, not at all. Speaking of which, I saw, last time I saw, who was I watching? Who did I go see last? Can't remember who it was, but remember A, who did nothing?
Yes.
They supported. You know what? They were really good. Genuinely were really good. I was surprised. I think it was the last time I saw Reef at, like, the Institute, like, a couple of years ago. Yeah, it was surprising how good they were and how many songs that I knew that I didn't know that I knew in my subconscious. But yeah. And finally, Stu made a hellacious claim in the Fancast group chat the other day, saying that the Oasis selling out confirms that they are the biggest band in the world. Now, Stu, I want to give you an opportunity here on this public forum to explain your comments with context.
I mean, the overall objective was to wind people up, as it is every day in there. But when you look at my point was, when you look at it out of context, and you had 40 million people registering their interest in this tour, which is nearly half of the entire population of this silly country. They're not the biggest band in the world because they failed in America and through their own devices and through their own fault, as we've mentioned. If they had managed to break America as well, I think it would have been undeniable. Because you look at what has happened in this country since they announced that. The whole thing's gone completely insane. Everyone's lost their minds. And you have 15 million people doing pre-sale tickets, registering for that. You have another 40 million people at 8 a.m. getting up and trying to get tickets for, what was it, 1.1 million spaces in the tour altogether. No other band does this. And I know what you said about how you classify it and different things like that. They always sold out. They sold out every gig they ever did from like 95 onwards until they split up. It's never a thing. And even Liam on his own, you look at Liam doing Nebworth on his own, that's sold out. Look at the weird hippie stuff that Noel has done with the High Flying Bird since. All that sold out every single time. And I know just selling out stadiums and whatever is just not. It's not a parameter of how big you are, because you can just throw in, well, yeah, they're big in your circle, but they're big everywhere. And like you said,
yeah, my argument is that Oasis aren't a band; they're a touring novelty because they're not releasing music. They're not going to. They won't, and if they do, it won't be any good.
Well, the last two albums were shit. I don't know. The last two albums were pretty shit. I mean, there was a few songs on there that I liked, but on the whole, they were awful and they're a massive disappointment. But at the time, and the fact that this comes out, and the reaction to things, and the fact that the whole country seems better. This, like, everyone's mood was just lifted. It doesn't make any sense. Why? Because now, was it a 4% chance of getting a ticket for this? For people who applied in the end, because there were so many people. And we've already talked about all the shit with the tickets and the pricing and all that stuff. But even so, like, everyone's mood in this country seems to have lifted because Oasis are back. And it's insane.
No, the impact that it had in a really short space of time is completely undeniable. But my argument in the chat at the time would have been that, yeah, Oasis aren't a band, they're a circus that's really popular. And I think a lot of people are morbidly obsessed with the idea of it falling apart more than they are interested in the idea of seeing it happen. And you know what I mean? Like, waiting for it to fall apart at the seams as well as going to it to enjoy it. The question I always wanted to ask was, like, what is the parameter? What are the metrics of a huge band? To be the biggest band in the world, what metrics do you have to achieve? This might be because I'm thinking about work all the time, KPIs, I don't know. But what are the metrics that you have to achieve, Stu, to be the biggest band in the world, in your opinion?
I think more than anything else, it's impossible, Ian. Realistically, it's impossible to say, because for everything you say, there's always an argument against. So, like, you could say, for 2 years, Steps were the biggest band in the world because they did the same thing. They sold out everywhere they went. People loved them. There was massive queues and everything. They had #1 singles. Were Steps the biggest band in the world because they achieved all that? Maybe. But realistically, you look at the cultural impact of it all, and like we said earlier about what it means to people, I think that's more than anything else what it means to us. How many people does it mean things to? And you've mentioned Linkin Park, and you mentioned Slipknot and whatever. There's a certain underground people who love that stuff, and them bands mean the world to them. And of course, some people love Pulp. Pulp means the world to them. You can say the same about Bruce Springsteen. You can say the same about Barry Manilow. But there's so many people around the world, other than America, who love Oasis. There's more of them than anyone else. And that was what I was kind of getting at. That it means so much more to more people.
See, I disagree. Like
not a good metric, but still.
You know, Russia, for example, Metallica in St. Petersburg, and having helicopters fly past while they're playing gigs and then dominating the entire of the world, still to this day bringing out albums and selling out arenas up and down. I would say Metallica are a bigger band than Oasis ever are and were, because of what their impact is on everything. They have this like culturally. I'd say they're a bigger band than Oasis.
To the dark people, yeah. But
They're not though, are they? Because like, who do they come out to in the NFL? They're the music. I mean, it'll be a college team, but it's still huge. And
yeah. No, but you know what? From a numbers point of view, if you count America and Russia, Metallica probably are. They're probably very, very similar. You know, we have to look into that. But that's why I'm saying it's impossible, because you can just throw Metallica back. You can throw back Ace of Base in Sweden. You can throw in ABBA. You can throw in anyone. You can throw in the Beatles, which is the obvious real answer for all this. But they're all on a similar level of hugeness.
I mean, Matt Cunnington on the Twitter said to release new music at least once a decade is the barometer. Andrew Wright. Now, this is why you don't get it, Stu. Because he put, you've got to be a guest star on The Simpsons in its golden era, roughly between 1991 and 97. Which is true. It probably is the only true barometer, to be honest.
It really is.
Well, Andy, what's your barometer to call yourself the best in the world, or the biggest band in the world? What have you got to achieve? What's the measure of success?
It is so difficult to define this, because, like, it's kind of nebulous, isn't it? It's a sort of meaningless title. The only thing today that I think you can sort of put any sort of stock on is who's the most streamed artist on Spotify. Like, I feel like that's the kind of measuring stick at the moment, because CD sales don't really mean anything anymore. So you're looking at your streaming, you're looking at YouTube views, stuff like that, and you probably are looking at ticket sales. You know, that probably is the measure of, you know, how many people turn out to see them. The answer today is BTS. They're the biggest band in the world. I couldn't tell you a single song they've actually put out, but they are the biggest band in the world. Like, I have no idea. I know who they are, but I don't know anything about them musically, to be honest. But I feel like that is that all. The other one that seems to appear on this list of most is The Weeknd, but they don't spell their name right, so I'm not accepting that. And that's one man. I was gonna say that might just be a person. I'm not 100% sure. I know nothing about their music, so.
He did this Super Bowl halftime show a few years ago.
Yes, he did. Again, I couldn't tell you any of the songs off it, but I can picture his face. I know,
because he was going around the corridors in the darkness and going all like this with the camera.
Yeah, and he did that terrible show with Johnny Depp's daughter. I can't remember what it was called. Yeah, so I think that is the answer. Is that it's evolved from what it was. I think back in our day. Back in the 10s and the early noughties, pre-Spotify, it would have been on how easy is it to get to see this band live? How easy is it to get your hand on their album? And I think that doesn't really exist anymore. So I think you do look to something like streaming being the main sort of source of who is the biggest band right now.
Well, if you look at it, the weekly top songs global, Die With A Smile, Lady Gaga, Bruno Mars, no idea. Birds of a Feather, Billie Eilish, got to be shit. Please, 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 Sabrina Carpenter, again. I know you know who that is. I've got no clue. Who by Jimin. We're just old. We don't get it.
And that's why Oasis means so much.
Yeah.
And summed it up eloquently there. Okay, excellent. Well, that was OasisCast. I hope everybody at home enjoyed it. We will get back to business as usual with MusicCast next outing. But I thought, for the sake of what's going on in the world at the moment, it was only fair that we did OasisCast. So if you've got any questions or any albums, we know which album we're going to do next for Music Club as well. We'll make sure we get that involved so you won't miss out on that. Thank you very much for listening. Cage Fighting Pod on the socials. Please tell a friend. If you can kind of repost this episode, that would be great. But like, quote tweet it, hashtag Oasis, try and get other people involved with it. That would be fantastic to try and get us kind of in the year of Orbis. We're not trying to make any money off this, but we're just trying to get to as many people as we can, and that would be great. But Stu, if you'd like to say goodbye.
Yeah, remember, just need a little time to wake up. Goodbye.
Andy, if you'd like to say goodbye.
Yeah, thanks a lot for joining us this week. Next week, we'll be back doing a question cast. We're going to be watching Dog Eat Dog, Nick Cage and our man Willem Dafoe reunited once again. So if you want to watch that and join us next week, you're more than welcome. See you later. Excellent.
And goodbye from me. And remember, if you've got no one to go fuck with, you can always go fuck yourself. Take it easy.